This is Gail Morgan welcoming you to the Libertarian Counterpoint. Now, your host, James Just.
And welcome to Libertarian Counterpoint. With me today is Mr. Richard Fields and Mr. John Cameron, who likes to remind me to tell you he's an author. All right, fellas, there's something that sits close to libertarians' heart, right? Is the House Judiciary panel last Wednesday advanced the renewal of the FISA authority. There were some tweaks to it, but we are not happy as libertarians with this whole FISA nonsense anyway. So do the tweaks even help, I guess, is the question. John, I know you had an opinion about this one, John.
I have an opinion about things I've never even heard of, James. So if they followed the rules, the tweaks would help. But since they don't follow the existing rules, what's going to make them follow the new rules? And even if you eliminated the FISA thing, they would still do whatever they wanted. So on paper, the new rules are better, but not best. And because they're actually violating the FISA rules in place now by spying on Americans and making an end run around it by buying information on Americans from people who have data. Now, people who have data can sell that data to anybody, so you could really say that they're not breaking the law, but to me they're breaking the letter of the law because they're not supposed to gather information on American citizens. So I think the change in rules would be better. The fact they need to get a warrant is an improvement, but just don't spy on Americans, period. And in a perfect world, don't spy on anybody. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think they allegedly are going to reduce the number of people who have access to those searches. But yeah, but do we actually believe any of this stuff? I mean, again, like John pointed out, if they're not following the rules now, what makes us think they're going to follow the rules later? I mean, they're making the rules for themselves. They violate the rules. They don't even get a wet noodle on the wrist, right? So why do we think they're going to follow anything?
Yeah, no, I mean, the whole idea of a FISA court, some judge that nobody's ever heard of, granting warrants willy-nilly, which there were some statistics done on the number of warrants sought and the number of warrants granted, and like 99.9% of the warrants sought from the FISA judge, who nobody knows who it is or has ever heard of them, they're all granted. So it's a silly formality anyway. They spy on whoever they darn well feel like, and changing the law is not going to affect that a whole lot.
So if we eliminate the law completely, do you think it would fix it, or they'd still keep doing it?
Well, they'd still keep doing it. I think Eric Snowden proved that they'd still keep doing it, right? They'll close that program and open a new one. That's what they do. It's pretty clear. And it's not even all that unusual, right? Government tyranny is all pervasive. As Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch, how do you actually pronounce that name? Gorsuch?
Gorsuch.
Yeah. He says we live in a world where everything has been criminalized, right? Everything we touch, everything we do is now criminalized. I mean, this is nothing actually new. What was it, 20 years ago?
It's been like 20 years or something like that since I think it was a Harvard professor wrote a book called 3 Felonies a Day, which posited with a lot of statistical empirical evidence that you can't get through a day. Any average person can't get through a day without unwittingly committing 3 felonies on average. And that's because there's thousands of federal laws that are felonious, not to mention state and local laws.
And then there's regulations that carry the weight of law.
Yeah.
For example, the examples it would just make me feel bad. I'm not going to give it. And we know there's lots of examples. The most egregious ones are FTC regulations, which aren't laws. The environmental laws supposedly allow an independent regulatory agency to be judge, jury, and executioner and write not laws, but regulations that carry the weight of laws. You can throw people in prison, you can take their homes away, you can sell their homes, you can take their property, and no state legislature, local legislature, or national legislature has ever acted to create a law that would have you do that. It's simply a regulation that an independent regulatory agency has promulgated itself and then become judge, jury, and executioner. So, it's we live in a massive world of regulations and laws.
And surveillance.
Yeah. Well, and let's put this: federal law enforcement agencies have confiscated more properties from Americans each year without criminal convictions than all the burglaries nationwide. So your federal government is the single biggest burglar in the country.
And that's just civil asset forfeiture. Add the tax take to that, and it dwarfs comparison. And taxes are simply a way of getting money through force or threat of force. In my book, that's theft.
Yeah, taxation is theft. There's a company that makes a nice T-shirt that says that. And the asset forfeiture, and then fines and fees related to money transactions amount to way more money than any bank robbers that are imposed on people's bank accounts being seized for no reason and have to actually fight to get their money back. And the government basically bargains with you after they extorted the money from you on how much you can get back, and most people let them keep some. So it's pretty egregious, and I don't know if there's really. I hate to think of it as the powers that be. I like to call them the powers that we let be. But anytime citizens try to get together to do anything, even if they get their representatives to step up to the plate and do what they're supposed to do, their elected representatives, the people who are basically violating constitutional law left and right aren't held accountable. They get less than a slap on the wrist. They get promoted. So, they get put in charge. Nothing happens to them. Yeah.
We take a wet noodle on the wrist these days, right, John?
As long as they're in the favored part of the elite political class, and if they're in the disfavored part of the elite political class, then something happens to them.
Yeah, well, then you get labeled a terrorist for getting angry at your school board, right? That's what happens if you're the disfavored side.
Right now, the government and all of its lackeys in the mainstream media, and even in new age media, are setting up white people, especially rural white people and conservative white people, as being the biggest terrorist threat in this country, and they're focusing resources on it. And I'm sure they're fomenting, groups of idiot young lads to do things to where they can splash across the newspaper. They're not focusing any attention on, basically organized rebellion that burned a lot of city cores to the ground and killed a bunch of people. So, they pick the fights they want to fight. And by labeling a class as a problem, they can go after the class and put resources on it and completely ignore another problem. So, interesting
the dehumanization.
stuff.
We've seen where this goes, right? We've seen this in history time and time again. So it doesn't end any place. So, Richard, you got a report from the fields for us this week?
Sure. I've got a report from the fields. Richard Fields with Report from the Fields. Last Thanksgiving Day, in central Dublin, Ireland, a woman and 3 children were stabbed near a school in the center of the city. The suspect was identified by the Irish Independent, a newspaper, as an immigrant from Algeria. Riots ensued. Some of the rioters were against immigration. The response of Irish politicians is to pass hate crime legislation targeting not only individuals, but also social media for any, and I quote, offense of preparing or possessing material likely to incite violence or hatred against persons on account of their protected characteristics, end quote. Now, some of those characteristics are listed elsewhere as national or ethnic origin, as well as transgender and gender other than those male and female. In other words, hate crimes. Arson, robbery, assault, and crimes against property are already against the law. The victims of those crimes suffer the same fate, whether the motivation of the criminal was hate or affective altruism or any other ideological motivation. Enhancing the penalty because of hate being the motivator does nothing to benefit the victim. The proposed laws would, however, significantly throttle freedom of speech and of the press. That's because one of the key features of the bill says social media companies can avoid being held in violation of the proposed law by agreeing to regulation of their content by the Irish government. In short, giving the government of Ireland censorship authority. Of course, the social media companies are all global, so censorship by Ireland is de facto worldwide censorship. Is Ireland doing this on its own? Doubtful. The voluminous language of the Patriot Act, for instance, in the US, was already written and sitting on the shelf, ready to be enacted in the case of a terrorist attack. 9/11 provided the excuse. Riots in Dublin, ostensibly linked to nationalistic Irish sentiments, are providing the excuse here. There is no direct evidence, but I would say it's a safe bet that anti-free speech ideologues in Europe and in the US are being very helpful to the Irish politicians pushing this Orwellian legislation. In the years BI, before internet, news with any possibility of mass dissemination was effectively limited to 3 Federal Communications Commission regulated and controlled TV and radio networks and a small handful of national newspapers, which were de facto controlled as well. When the internet made it possible for anyone with a Facebook or Twitter account to become their own news outlet with the capability of reaching millions, real free speech had a very brief period in which to blossom. Politicians didn't like it. I remember Hillary Clinton publicly lamenting the internet for lacking the oversight that the government has over legacy mass media. They are desperately trying to get that control back. Michael Schellenberger and Matt Taibbi and the other principals at Public are working hard to expose them and their government censorship complex. We wish them well. This is Richard Fields with Report from the Fields. See you next week.
Thank you, Richard. And this actually brings up an interesting thing. There's discussions here around in California, and I know we were going to push this off, John, but we're going to end up talking about it. How the legislature, they're talking about how legislatures, California specifically, must act to protect local news. Yeah, they must act to protect. So getting the government, getting money, local news is going to get improved by getting government money. And just government money only comes with strings, right? There's no government dollar that doesn't come without some string attached somewhere.
Well, it's not just strings, it's government control. If government is funding your newspaper, you're going to dance to the tune of the government. Just like right now, the media companies, all of them, they get a huge percentage of their advertising revenue from prescribed drugs, from drug manufacturers, advertising drugs that you can't get without a prescription. And when the narrative about vaccines being 95% effective and harmless and all that came down the pike, you can bet that the drug companies were very, very effective at pulling strings at the major networks to say, you better not give any time or space or mouthpiece to all of these anti-vax nuts. He who controls the purse strings controls the dialogue.
I agree. Yeah.
And then, go ahead, John.
Yeah. Well, there's also a move afoot, unless I'm jumping ahead, and if I am, just rein me back in, to force the internet companies to pay newspapers for content, and actually, as a writer, I don't quite frankly understand if they're publishing trademarked copyrighted materials, which it is, because if I want to republish a newspaper article, I have to get permission from the newspaper, pay for it. But if I'm a Google or someone else, I don't have to. I just take it and publish it. And then when somebody wants to search for that article and they don't go to the newspaper website themselves, they punch it into Google. What it takes you to is not specifically that newspaper article, but whatever thing is paying Google the greatest advertising dollar. And then when they do click on it, the revenue stream doesn't go to the people that wrote the article that is copyrighted for me, but not copyrighted for Google or Facebook or all the rest of that. So I sort of understand their thinking on it. The other side of the coin is, oh, well, they get revenue with click-through, but they don't. They get revenue of 40% of the time, and the revenue split is basically decided by an algorithm of the Google or Facebook or whatever. But the idea that government is involved at all in quote unquote news, and somehow this is a new thing. It's been happening forever. Basically, newspapers have been leading us into war. They've been leading us into legislative, laws. By focusing, with guidance, of course, by focusing on the issues that the nomenclatura, the political class, the deep state, whatever you want to call them, want them to focus on, and not focusing on those things that they are. If you have any doubt about that, just do a Google search for Hunter Biden's 7 misdemeanor tax evasion charges and his 3 felony tax evasion charges, and see how hard it is to find it. How absolutely hard it is to find it. So,
well, stop using Google, and you'll find it a lot easier there, John.
Well, yeah, but what I'm saying is, good, since Google has 80% of the web search traffic, I use the DuckDuckGo as much as I can. And a lot of things I use Google for because it's easy. I know they're tracking me. I have them do quick translations for me. I have them do math problems for me. I mean, you put a word problem into Google, their algorithms are magnificent. They work really, really well, as long as you're asking them questions that they want to give you the answer to. They work not at all if you're asking questions that they won't want to give you the answer to, or the answer might be against the nomenclaturas, the Mandarin's newspeak. So yeah, you're absolutely right. And thanks for the plug for DuckDuckGo. Let's plug them again. DuckDuckGo is probably the most objective search engine, but it's also from a lickety split, easy to use perspective, not nearly as easy to use as Google. I understand why people use Google. I use it a lot for stuff. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking now.
Well, I use it for things like translating, because I'm not one who cares about the tracking. I don't care if these companies sell my tracking data to a marketing person so they can poorly try to sell me something, because they're just terrible at trying to sell me things. So I just don't care. It's just how that one works. All right, so we're going to move on to another one that's at the bottom of your heart, Jonna. A California moving company, Meathead Movers, is being sued because it promotes its young staff, its young, energetic, healthy staff. And the Biden administration says this is age discrimination because, older workers may not apply because of the young staff. And as someone who has, at 19, 20, 21, worked as a furniture mover, at 40, would not want to be doing it, quite frankly. I don't understand the complaint here. And there was never a complaint, right? And that's part of the other issue, is the government just decided on its own.
And is there any evidence that Meathead Movers doesn't hire meatheads who are 50? I don't think so.
No, there is. Here's the thing: there's none. And if you dive into this, it is pretty insidious. The EEOC gets lots and lots and lots of complaints. There was no complaint on Meathead Movers. They took this case on their own, went after them. And they said, give us $12 million and we won't put you out of business. Guy couldn't afford $12 million. He eventually negotiated down to $650. And for some reason, it's still going on. This sounds like a great case for a PLF or an IJ. But then this guy was interviewed on one of the Fox affiliates. And the guy made a point that I make repeatedly on the show. And I wonder if he stole it from me, which is, this guy sitting there and says, I'm who I am. And I look out and I see in athletics, there's the only people that football teams hire. I think he used football. They're big, athletic, young people. That's outright age discrimination. Why don't they hire people like me? I mean, you can look at it. It's age discrimination. He didn't make the point that it could also be race discrimination, because many sports are what?
Or muscle discrimination. I don't have any.
Yeah, muscle discrimination and all the rest of that. So he said, could it be that there are actually objective hiring criteria for some jobs? So, but they don't. There is no case for meathead movers having violated any law. There's nobody who came forward and said, I'm a 70-year-old gym rat and I'm retired, but I'd like to work out and get a little income part-time, because these are all part-time people, by moving furniture around. I wouldn't want to do it full time, but it'd be a good workout. You do that a couple hours a day or a couple hours a week. As long as your back's in good shape, why not? It's just like instead of going to the gym and paying for a gym membership, you go earn whatever they're being paid, $25 an hour or whatever. So, but I am willing to bet that they have, as part of the job. I've applied for jobs before it said must be able to lift over 70 pounds. I don't know why, when I look at what the job is, that I'd ever need to be able to lift 70 pounds, other than maybe the ego of the president of the company. But there are physical requirements, and I'm sure they would love to hire some old dude or old woman or old they to throw boxes around. It would be great publicity, but there wasn't a complaint by anybody who applied at the company. It was brought by the EEOC itself. And I don't understand why. Richard, help me out with my conspiracy theory here. I'm trying to figure out why
they're doing it because they can. They're doing it because they can. I don't know.
Yeah, it's because they can. Again, I worked as a mover back in my youth, and the older people were drivers or they were packers. Right, the older people weren't the ones who moved the boxes. Older people weren't the ones who moved the furniture. They were the drivers. They were the people who packed it. So the people like me, when they dropped it down a flight of stairs, nothing broke. These are the kind of things that they do. And so, anyway, we're going to move on. We talked about the FISA warrant earlier, but here in California, even at community college, you can't get away from this government spying. We gave a story about a college student who has everything. He just wanted to be left alone. He didn't want to be tracked. But anytime he turns around, his community college here in California is, Mount San Antonio College, which was California's largest community college. It's 26,000 students. And yet he can't get away from being surveilled by his school. And yet these are the same people who tell us, we've got to worry about Google and Facebook and all these other things surveilling us. But yet, the government, by way of our school, which is where all of us first get their first touches of government, is surveilling us literally everything we do. Right? Am I wrong here that this is just, what are we doing? Are we teaching these kids to accept it? Is that what's going on?
Richard, you want to talk?
I'm just going to say that there's a lot of conditioning that goes on. I mean, I live in a retirement community where there's signs up that say there are cameras surveilling this property. And if you walk into a shopping mall, if you walk into a shopping center parking lot, pretty much anywhere you want to go, there are going to be closed circuit cameras surveilling you, and signs saying that there are closed circuit cameras surveilling you. I have a feeling that a lot of the surveillance is, makes sense. You can, get video evidence of somebody committing a crime. That's better than, hearsay evidence or second, somebody, witness evidence. But there's an awful lot of it that goes on, I think, because there's a feeling of safety false feeling of safety that people get if they feel like everything is being surveilled. And if you can surveil legitimately, it makes it a lot easier for government to surveil illegitimately, which is what we're seeing with the FISA warrant, lack of warrants or whatever you want to call it. So, it's a conditioning thing.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I'd add something, if you folks ever want to watch a good show, British, of course, called The Capture. It's about manipulation of video. That's just part of it. The deep state, can't legally get people, so they create video that proves that they've committed crime, by having the supercomputers that you and our tax dollars paid for. And there's somebody that would tell you, if you get enough video on tape of anybody, you could, if you spend some time in an editing room, create a video of them saying horribly egregious things and plotting to create some kind of activity that's violently against the law and all the rest of that. So
that's the whole AI thing.
Yeah, I'm, and you don't even need AI to do it. You're thinking the AI is just, a higher speed algorithm. It's artificial intelligence. I mean, that it's like worrying about. Never mind. I'm going off on a tangent. We don't have much time left. But the more video that's out there of someone, the easier it is to use that video for facial recognition later. The more samples you have, and even if they try to change their appearance, the easier it will be at some point for somebody to throw it all into that supercomputer and say, create a video of John putting a gun to somebody's head. If you capture video of me at the range with a gun in my hand and a bunch of background video, I mean, heck, I could probably do it if I want to spend 2 years. So, it's pretty creepy. And
so what you're saying, John, is we're screwed because we sit here and we say all kinds of things every week, so they can make us say whatever we want.
Well, nobody has to even edit my stuff. I'm surprised I'm not on a terrorist watch list. And I write thrillers where I do lots and lots of research on how to blow stuff up and make people sick and kill people and all the rest of that. And you know what? I don't even try to hide it anymore. I do it on Google because it's quicker. And I know that no matter
what. All right, John, we are out of time. We got to go. We're out of here. Thanks, you guys, for watching. Please remember to love everybody and have a good night.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching the Libertarian Counterpoint Show. In Sacramento, Channel 17 on Comcast.